you. And this is Ed again in San Diego, and welcome to Global TV Talk Show, a business unit of GlobalBusinessNews.net. And our YouTube channel is on. And with us today from the Washington area is who you see here. This is terrific. So Ron Cooper, please wave. Hi, Ron. And Chuck Brooks is right there. He's also in the Washington area. Matt Burns has the headset on in the Washington area, and Hampton Dowling, also from the Washington area. We will have a few others. In about 35, 40 minutes from now, we're going to have a guest from Sweden join us. And Attica Ahmed is a senior executive within Hitachi Energy, and she's based in Stockholm area. One of her responsibilities is global mobility. And she has been our guest a few times on our programs and likes the format and very much enjoys the camaraderie. So I'm going to ask each of you now to briefly, within a minute or two, give us a headline about you and your current business. Ron Cooper.
Thank you, Ed. I'm Ron Cooper of the Washington, D.C. area, actually about 90 minutes south. I am a former Air Force, 22 years. I flew the F-4, which is a Phantom aircraft. And following the 22 years with the Air Force, was an executive with aerospace industry. And now I speak. I'm an inspirational, motivational speaker while also training leadership in. Ed, you mentioned camaraderie. I will tell you that amongst the three businesses, from my perspective, the law enforcement, along with firefighters, the military has almost, I consider a market on camaraderie, and I speak on that. So, Ed, good to be with you and the rest of you.
Thank you very much. Hampton Dowling, former naval commander, if I have that right, Hampton?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And now an expert on international maritime trade, is that right?
Well, it's one of the focal points of my consultancy. After retiring in the Navy, command at sea, I spent a number of years in the defense industry, a number of companies, larger major defense contractors. When the economy changed in 2009, I opened my own consultancy, and it's just been an incredible ride. My focus is in a number of different, but very specific market verticals. It's energy services, logistics. I still have a focus on national security and homeland defense. But of late, I've shifted a lot towards bringing non-U.S. companies over into the United States as part of foreign direct investment. And I've always been helping companies kind of sort through some of the challenges that they face, certainly with international business. It gets very complicated. And part of our focus today is the impact of geopolitics, which is very important and has a direct effect. So companies need some guidance as to, how to move forward. So it's what I do, Ed. And knowing you, Ed, is always a good part of it.
I know we met maybe 10 years ago or so, and through Scott Hamilton's office. Yeah, and then we've stayed in touch. And Hampton has been an in-person speaker in my DC area meetings pre-COVID, and someday we'll do it again. I was, as you know, scheduled to be in DC this week for the Worldwide Employee Relocation Convention, but we've got some issues here at home, and I thought it's safer for me to be here. Safer meaning nothing to do with physical harm or danger. It's just family issues. So this is cheap and easy. I don't have to fly or spend money in a hotel.
You
And
still look handsome, Ed, so all is good.
you know what? I'm staying that way. I've got the magical face cream on, and the magic camera doesn't show any wrinkles, so it's cool. Matt, Tulo International, give us a rundown about Tulo today.
So I basically work with companies. Most of them are smaller companies in the defense area that are looking to do some work overseas, and helping them figure out, what to include when they're putting together a proposal, so that they actually make money, and helping them keep up with some of the changes and some of the different countries where they're interested in doing business.
All right. Okay. Now, when did you work at Lockheed?
So after I retired from the State Department in 2005, I became the Lockheed Martin Global Mobility Director, and I did that until 2017.
Uh-huh. And so now you work with Gadir and other Duncan and I mean Dwayne and
Yeah.
and that they must really relish your experience and make their job easier.
Well, they worked for me when I was at Lockheed Martin, but
Uh-huh.
most of my clients are not of that size. They're mostly smaller.
I see. Okay, great. And do you, and as I understand it, you deal with companies a lot in defense, and what you don't do is anything with embassies or NGOs as of now, anyway.
Well, I mean, embassies, they really it's a completely different um, a type of world. So they kind of do their own thing. And a lot of the things that a private company would be concerned about, like taxes, um, they have exemptions from all of that, because of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. So, they don't really have the same needs that, a private firm might have. I've done a little bit of work with NGOs, but that's not really a growth area for me.
Okay, we're joined now by Dr. Ken Lloyd from LA. Hi, Ken, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to
Uh,
see and or meet all of you.
And also from Stephen Howard, just published his 25th book, which he's going to talk about in a few minutes from now. Welcome, Steve. And also in LA is Gary Sanger, who's a preeminent executive search consultant executive. Thank you again, Gary, for being on the program.
My pleasure. Who was the 25 book author?
Stephen.
Stephen, how do you keep track? How in the world do you keep track on how many books you got? And if you wrote one yet this morning, I'm just really interested as to how you figure that out. Nice to see you, Stephen. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Gary. I finished one yesterday. I haven't written one this morning yet. I'll try to improve my productivity here. I keep a spreadsheet,
It's early.
Gary.
It's early. You still have time.
Yeah, I keep a spreadsheet partially because I tell you what, it's getting hard to figure out who to dedicate these books to. So I had to keep a list of everyone I've dedicated to so I don't replicate myself too much.
I think Ed's a good possibility.
You're cool. You're cool. Thank you, my friend. Okay, introductions for those who've just joined. And as I mentioned earlier, in about 40 minutes, we'll be joined by Attica from Sweden, from Hitachi Energy Worldwide. And there may be another surprise guest. There's a number of people who said they're going to try to tune in from their iPhones while they're in Washington for this week's convention. So I would like to once again say thank you to all of you for your time and what's going to be a really interesting and fast-paced program here. There'll be a number of mini keynotes, and a few people have some slides. Hampton Darling has a time constraint, so we're going to get him on first once we begin. He has a couple of slides to show, but he needs some help from one of you to how to upload his slides into my screen share. Okay, so when the time is right, in just a couple of minutes. So Dr. Ken Lloyd has been on our program many times. He's an author. He's got a new book coming out in December. Why don't you tell these people and the audience out there in the world about the latest Dummies book?
I'm sure be glad to. I'm thinking about the question about uploading. If my grandson were here, he's 11, he could do this in 2 seconds. I can't even get my phone to work right, but
Well, I'm
anyhow,
used to Teams and other things. I don't remember how to do it with Zoom, and I haven't done Zoom for a while, so I'll figure. I don't know. Ed, you got the slides, so maybe your colleague easier.
I'm all thumbs, so I'm not even going to try. I'm afraid I'm going to lose connection. So I've had enough. Okay, Ken, what's the book?
Yeah, the book is a new edition of a book that I did for the Dummies folks 15 years ago on performance appraisal. And they had come to me at the end of last year and said, would you do a new edition of this book? Since so much has gone on in the field, I said, I'd be glad to do it. So it's performance appraisals and phrases for dummies. It deals with the newer approach, getting away from this once a year annual and then all the angst and anxiety that goes with that, and really getting it more into more frequent sessions, certainly continuous feedback, taking a more forward focus, more emphasis on coaching, certainly dealing with employees where there are performance problems, but not so much as a disciplinarian, but really more as a partner, as a collaborator, and building from there. The book has also, because apparently readers like this, over 3,300 phrases that'll help if you're trying to figure out, well, what exactly should I say in these various areas? So I've written a few thousand phrases to include an update in the book, and it's coming out on December 17th. So thank you, Ed.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, Gary Sanger is longtime executive in California and elsewhere. Gary, why don't you quickly introduce yourself? And also, if you don't mind, talk about your prior military service, because Hampton Dowling is a former naval commander, and Ron Cooper is a former jet fighter pilot, like Maverick, Tom Cruise kind of guy.
Well, I thought they
and
looked
Matt,
alike. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, they very a lot of similarities there.
that must be it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and Matt Burns, former State Department executive and Lockheed. So Gary, what was your military service?
Well, good morning. First off, I was not so recently promoted from Airman 3rd class to Airman 2nd class. I spent almost 20 months in the Air Force, and my career was very short because I have bad eyes. And so the real short of it was joining the Air Force instead of going to college, ticking off my parents, but it worked out great. I learned the Russian language at Syracuse University way
Okay.
back. Way back when all of our instructors were native Russians. They had devoted their life to the U.S., and I could not have seen more of an incredible emotional display when JFK was killed. So it dates me back then. And I just absolutely, my father-in-law is retired Air Force colonel with more than 38 missions over Germany. So that's where I hang my hat in terms of someone that really made a difference. It's a pleasure. My day job is retained executive search. We do recruiting and fill out senior management and executive teams across the country. So it's nice to be here, Ed, and not so recently promoted from Airman 3rd class, Mr. Cooper. I know you will recognize that as being a very, very low in the totem pole kind of a rank. Good to be here.
Oh, please, I never suggested any thought of being low in rank. No, we appreciate you and what you offer the team.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Okay, Stephen Howard is a leadership coach, author of 25 books, and 26 is in the oven. But more so, he's just a blue ribbon winner of another book called Humany. And it was recognized as a deal changer, a life-changing thing for talent management and executives. Stephen, you could do a lot better than me in going further. Please take the stage here for a couple of minutes. And please, if you can, help Hampton load his slides up when you're done. And we're all going to sit and watch it happen.
Oh, I appreciate the kudos, Ed. The book you're referring to came out about 18 months ago called Human Leadership, Mindset, Skills, and Behaviors for Being a Successful People Leader or People-Centric Leader. And it's changed the mindsets of many people. It's, the main thing I focus on is, some of you have heard me say before, no one wakes up in the morning and says, boy, I can't wait to be managed by my boss today. As leaders, we manage things, we manage processes, policies, procedures, projects, but we lead people, and we have to put that hat on. Now, there are times I admit we have to manage people, but hopefully with the management hat is only on about 10 or 15% of our time. And if it's on 85% of the time, 90% of the time, we've either hired the wrong people or we're doing the wrong job of being a leader, and we're micromanaging people. So that's the gist of the book, the gist of a lot of what my coaching and mentoring is for leaders, from everyone from supervisors on up to the C-suite and entrepreneurs, and helping them change that mindset and understand how to build sustained results through that mindset. So thanks, Ed.
You bet. Okay, so why don't you quickly hold up the front cover, if that's what you'd like to do, of number 25, and then we'll circle back to you in about 30 minutes or so, if that's okay.
Oh, happy to. This is the new book that came out last week, Monday of last week, so about 8 days ago. And I've taken that human concept now and applied it in our personal lives as well as our professional lives. And the concept here is change the world by changing your mindset. And I'll talk about that a little later and try and get you involved in this movement of creating a better world that our children and grandchildren can inherit.
What a cool cover.
Thank you. Thank you. If you want, I can explain that now, or I can explain it later.
Why don't you explain it now, and then we'll come back and go deeper.
Okay. So 3 key elements in that are in the mind area is the tree of life. The tree of life, as you know, is a fundamental archetype for many of the world's mythologies, religions, philosophical traditions, and it represents harmony and balance in nature and a connection of the earthly and the spiritual. And the arms, on the arms, what looks like the veins of the arms is actually the DNA double helix. Because as you probably know, we have about 99.9999% of the same DNA in all of us. As a matter of fact, some geneticists believe that everybody on this planet is at least a 50th cousin to every other person on the planet. And some even think that if we go into a room about 20 people, there's a very good chance that a 16th cousin will be in that room. That's how closely interconnected we are as humanity. And then the interesting thing I found, and as I was working on the book, if you look at the rainbow, and that rainbow is a rainbow around the sun, and the Navajo and Hopi Native American tribes ascribe a special meaning to this rainbow. They call it a sundog, a rainbow sundog. And each color in the rainbow represents the different people of the world. And when the rainbow does come out around the sun, which doesn't happen very often, to the Navajos and Hopi tribes, it indicates a unification of the different nations and is a sign of impending harmony in the world. And that's what I would like to bring to the world, some harmony. So that's the gist of the cover. And I really had to challenge my graphic artist in Mexico to take all those words and create something. And he did a pretty good job. So thank you.
So do you speak Spanish? How did you communicate your inner thoughts to this fellow?
Usually over a couple of cervezas. That's where my inner thoughts usually come from, or a glass of vino tinto. But no, he speaks good English, much better than my Spanish. And as you know, he did the previous book, Human Leadership, which has a kind of a jigsaw puzzle background on it. And he did that because that book is about how to do business with Americans. So it's aimed at the international community. And he said, I'm glad you're doing this book because I find doing business with Americans to be puzzling. And I said, elaborate on that. And so he took those thoughts and he created that cover, and it has a jigsaw puzzle in the background. That book is called Partnering Successfully with American Firms.
We'll get back to you on that, and you can display that cover. First, we need to have Hampton Dowling speak. Steve, could you help Hampton upload his slides to my screen share? Is there a button he should push?
Yeah, Hampton,
Yeah.
it's either at the bottom of your screen or the top of the screen will be something called share screen.
Yeah, I
And
got share here. I see that.
Yeah, just click on that, and
Yeah.
then it should say, I'll look at it'll now show you what's on your desktop, and then just pick whatever image it is of the slides that you want. And in the lower right-hand corner should be a blue button called share. And that should bring your slides up automatically, or document whatever it is you want to share.
Well, in that case, I'm not doing it well.
I'll tell you what, if you, I've just put my email address in the chat box. If you want to email them, I can upload them for you. But
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you very
take a few
much.
seconds.
Ed, I thought you had a guy there that could do that. Huh?
Yeah, he's on with you right now.
Oh,
Stephen.
well, I sent the slides to your email.
To Stephen's email or to mine?
Or to yours. I sent them about.
Ed, forward them to me. Forward them to me, Ed.
Yeah, I gotta find them here. I'm so sorry. Hampton, why don't you start your talk and then we'll get the slides going. I'm going to send them to Stephen.
Well, it's hard to talk when you don't have the slides.
Okay, so let's go on to Ken Lloyd. What, Ken Lloyd, you have been on our programs for more than a year now, and this kind of a gathering, which a bunch of people coming around who mostly don't know each other other than superficially, the psychological basis of this kind of an encounter is a test of one's being calm, cool, collected, media savvy. Your PhD is in industrial psychology, organizational development. That is so needed today. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I totally agree. And I think these kinds of gatherings with such a diverse, interesting, and amazingly experienced group just builds it just builds all of us. I mean, I look at these programs as educational, informative, and entertaining. And it's always great to see the folks who've been on before, as well as to meet the new and very impressive people. I think for today, where it's so easy for individuals, particularly the generations coming up, to get so caught up on their cell phones and social media, and it clearly impedes development, growth, and we're even seeing issues of anxiety, depression, and I don't like to say it, but suicide among a much higher percentage of younger people in the past. So to me, getting together, well, it would be even better if we're all sitting in a room. This is a much greater step than sitting and perhaps reading or ignoring it and just sitting out on social media and walking into a tree, or as Stephen Howard sees people walking with their heads down, thumping around. This is a great way to educate, to uplift, to build our understanding. It's just this type of gathering just has so many positives to it, and frankly, it would help take us to the kind of world that we're all hoping for and envisioning through our work and through our various skills that we bring to bear. So totally for it, Ed. I think it's just a great contribution all around.
Thank you for your impromptu help here. Steve, did you get my slides?
I'm still checking, not yet. Hold on, check again.
They're really cute, easy to read. I reviewed them earlier. I wish I had more tech skills myself, and then I'd do it myself, but I'm going to need a lesson and practice at another time.
No, I'm sorry, they haven't come through yet, but I don't recall meeting Chuck before. Could oh yeah, they just came through. Could maybe Chuck introduce himself and I'll get these slides loaded up for you.
Okay, Chuck, please.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Chuck Brooks. I know some of you. I currently teach at Georgetown University in the Cybersecurity Risk Management program for the last 7 or 8 years. But my career was mostly in government. I was a plank holder at the Department of Homeland Security and helped set the Science and Technology Directorate up. And I spent 10 years on the Hill for the late Senator Al Inspector, and then moved into corporate world where I was VP for Homeland Security of Xerox, Vice President of Research and Development for RapidSky, and then I retired out of General Dynamics Mission Systems as a scout for cybersecurity technology. And though Steve's got 25 books, I have my first book just published 2 days ago. It just came out called Inside Cyber. And
Way to go.
and it's basically talks about the implications for our privacy and security of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, IoT, and 5G, basically the new ecosystem that's surrounding us and engulfing us, and what it means for the future.
So Chuck, in a few minutes, when Hampton is done, we want to go to you, and you're certainly welcome to upload any slides that you have if you want. Okay, you need to go bigger.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
Yeah, good. There's really clever slides, Hampton. I'm really delighted that you did this. So Hampton, did you build those yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's always,
That's great.
you always take slides from what you've done previously and you just sort of shake them up a little bit, like shake and bake, and kind of tweak them a little bit, and here we are.
That's great. Are you using Canva or some other program that helps you do that?
No. Just PowerPoint. Yeah, we try to keep it simple. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. So everybody, Hampton has years of experience that I know of through speeches he's given at my events and some talk shows that we've done together. Years of experience in helping companies understand, helping chief executive offices understand nuances and the real costs of doing business today. Hampton, would you like to address that topic, considering the esteemed audience we have on camera as well as out there in
Well, I need to
TV?
go. I don't know. I need to go to the first slide. I don't know if I don't know if I can manage it from here. All I do is see one of the slides.
Should have the second slide up now with the armed conflicts, trade agreements.
No, I don't. I have some other slide. No.
What I see on my screen is a young man in a tie, brown hair, the global economy and myriad of external influences are driven by factors beyond the long term.
Yeah, and I see your inbox. It's still associated with your Microsoft Outlook inbox. It's not the total screen.
Okay. Steve, you need to go slideshow.
Yeah, it's on, well, on my computer, guys, it's on slideshow. I mean, it's full screen on my computer.
My screen is showing the inbox.
It's still showing the inbox?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll see your inbox.
All right, I'll try it again. Maybe something clicked on the wrong thing.
We need to get a 14-year-old involved here.
That's really something.
Here we are.
Wonderful. Okay.
So we need to go to the first slide, I think, and
Thank you, Stephen.
yeah.
First slide up.
Well, Ed, when you invited all of us to participate and contribute, my thought was, well, how do I match geopolitics to business? And you don't really have to speak to the topic when you have conversations with individuals that are in the Fortune 250, 200 companies. And my consultancy and where I spend most of my time are companies that are mid-size and not necessarily always in Washington. If you're in Washington, every week there's an event going on that's associated with geopolitics. It's vastly different than when you go across the bridge, across the river, across the moat from Washington into the rest of America. Companies aren't necessarily aware of, they're not focused on what we look at in Washington, which is really the external influences, what drives politics, what creates a multitude of decisions that influence business. So I try to distill it into parts that are digestible by mid-sized companies that really produce and generate income and products and services for our country. So moving to the first slide, you have to think about geopolitics in the sense of, what are the contributing factors? What hits us from the outside that plays a role in shaping the businesses today? When there's a lot of armed conflicts, but trade agreements, our commodities, the materials that are used for production, for services, they all come from somewhere. They're managed by trade agreements, whether they're from between companies or countries, but mostly the overarching influences by national governments. And they're executed by multinational corporations, many of which are not managed or owned by the U.S. Board members are non-U.S. citizens. Their allegiances, their focuses to shareholders, but not necessarily to the United States itself. So it does affect business rather directly when you have to consider where you're sourcing your materials, who's controlling and managing those materials, and what are the driving influences of politics. There are national alliances that influence bilateral trade agreements and the imbalances of trade. And all these are rather ethereal topics to many mid-sized companies that aren't part of the day-to-day diatribe of Washington. And it's important to, from my perspective, to give some insights as to what those impacts are on business today. Elections play a role, but to a tremendous extent, geography is an extraordinary player in geopolitics. So that takes us to the center of the slide. Just today, we have we'll just stay on that original slide. In the middle, you have 7 ongoing conflicts that didn't exist 3 years ago. 3 years ago, this center circle, by and large, was white. It had nothing going on. And today, all around the world, we have an immense amount of armed conflict. If you just simply look at the 2 circles that are on the far right, Taiwan, and then you look at Southeast Asia, that involves 40% of the world's population. All of this is in some level of armed conflict or contentious logistics or a lot of stress that has an influence on business. And all this influences political priorities and, in a sense, also influences the movement of people, whether it's tourists, businesses, but the mobility of people are largely influenced by these type of conflicts, which, of course, when you take it into what does it mean for business, it influences supply chains, which is commodities, it's minerals, it's the underpinning and the fundamental engine of business. When you influence supply chains, then of course you influence the financial markets, which then of course has a direct bearing on industry agreements worldwide. So when you want to sell your product, when you want to provide your services outside the United States, or you want to attract business from outside the United States to us, there's an impact caused by and large from conflicts that we're seeing around the world, but also by trade imbalances, national alliances, who's controlling, who's influencing supply chains, minerals and commodities, who's managing these trade agreements. All these largely external factors play an enormous role in every element of business. So what does all this mean for mid-sized companies here in the United States? So we go to the next slide and we bring it a lot closer to home. You know, certainly these large conflicts that we see ongoing puts a lot of pressure on government spending, which increases our debt and increases the number of dollars in circulation. So the fundamentals of business is it causes a lot of inflation, and it really puts a lot of pressure on what's the leverage of the dollar, what can we do with the dollar, what's the value of the dollar. And of course, if you're a manufacturer, it affects the cost of goods sold. It affects your profit, which is based on revenue and the price that you're able to place in the marketplace. In the end, it affects your output, the solvency of your business, your ability to manage labor. All these are factors that are what we learn in school in the strategic profit model. You know, these conflicts that cover almost a little bit more than half the global population, that cover every continent, with the exception of perhaps South America and Australia, have a direct bearing on business. Geopolitics has a direct bearing on business. So as you look to the right and you follow this red line and you go through all these contributing influences, here at home, it affects what are the public services that are available to us, the amount of taxes you pay. It affects the relationships that you have with consumers, your contracts. And then again, what is the impact on your business plan? What's the impact? What's your leverage for investment? And how does it affect the aspirations of your business? So something that's going on in the European Union, the impact of supply chains coming out of Africa and Southeast Asia, it affects the productivity of your company after somehow things get to the United States, the cost of having those goods and services delivered to you. So in turn, you can manage your business, estimate your cost, assign a price, and go into executing your business. But you know, these are a lot of factors that you just can't consider every day, but they are factors that matter and influence your business. So as we kind of gravitate from the big picture to more of a local picture, these factors that are largely external to the United States drive inflation, which of course affects whether you have full-time employees or part-time. Today, we're finding labor strikes that haven't existed for perhaps 20 years. It affects unemployment, your interest rates, the cost of capital. Foreign direct investment is lower, venture capital and private equity investments are lower. So today, the impact of geopolitics on business is enormous. And when something happens outside the United States and ends up affecting your interest rates, your ability to leverage capital to expand your business, those dots can be perhaps more easily seen when you examine it in that way. So going on to the next slide, how should your company really address this challenge? Well, how do you harmonize the indelible impacts of geopolitics, geography on your business? Well, you have to take a look at your business model. What's the probable return on invested capital today? And what's your influence on the market vertical? Is your product unique? Is your service unique? Do you make a pivotal impact in your market vertical, or is it something lesser thereof? Well, that makes a difference on re-examining your business model. Look at your brand, how it is in the public domain. Does that need to be changed? Look at your portfolio. Are you really captured by a myopic, rather narrow set of revenue streams? Do you need to diversify? Look at your partnerships, but most of all, you have to communicate with your employees, even your corporate C-suite. You have to express faith in your employees, but also make sure you're communicating with your shareholders. And the last slide is, what do you do? What do you, not your company, actually, how do you address what's next? Because it's a great question. as an executive, you can't boil the ocean. You can't understand all of the moving parts of geopolitics. I mean, the people we elect and serve in Washington certainly can't do it every day. But you should take time to understand what is going on, even if it's just some part of your week, looking at the Sunday morning news shows, financial shows, to get an understanding of what is the bearing of geopolitics on financials. Maybe attend some subject matter forums in your local area so you get a better understanding of what are the connections between geopolitics and regional business. What I found very useful, and I was taught when I had a lot of business being a lot of focus of my business in the Emirates, was to perhaps read a problem or a challenge from right to left. Take a look at the influencing factors that are going on in the world and trace it from the right all the way to your business, instead of perhaps examining a problem from right to left. As soon as you understand what are all the influencing factors, you can have a much better idea about how to shape and structure your business to successfully navigate these challenges. Talk about ideas and issues that are going on, but first, always remember the business fundamentals don't change. That strategic profit model doesn't change. The elements of creating revenue and cash flow and profit don't change. So it's important to understand what's going on geopolitically, how it relates to your market, your vertical, your region, your employees, and ultimately how does that shape your business. And you really need to do it now. The world, we have so many external pressures, and they're not going to go anyway anytime soon. We have everything from cybersecurity issues to trade issues to immigration issues. The world is changing. It's changing rapidly, and the more we as executives, certainly at mid-sized companies, understand what are the external pressure points, the better we can change our business models, leverage better partnerships, and have a more successful business.
Hampton, this is really good. Thank you. Now, I want to ask you a question about maritime trade. You're steeped in that industry. You're an editor, the editor of that Panama-based publication. Is that correct? Please
Yes,
correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's an
Yeah.
editor of Transports magazine. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So the South China Sea, I was reading recently, is from Taiwan and Korea in the north, Japan in the north, through Philippines, down to Australia, ground zero, right?
Well, 65% of all the raw materials, critical minerals, and so forth that China needs for its economy, for its industry, are all transit through the South China Sea. And roughly 40% of the world's global commerce goes through the South China Sea. Manipulating those sea lanes has a direct impact on sourcing materials for U.S. industry, whether it's indirectly creating the products in China and having them shipped to the United States, or our business relationships with nations in Southeast Asia. If you manipulate those sea lanes, if you have an influence, you control them, you have a direct bearing on perhaps 70% of the global economy. It becomes very important to keep the South China Sea lanes open. And right now they're contested. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of gunfire. China claims all of the South China Sea, all the way up to Taiwan. So how do you manage that geopolitically? Well, that's not in our rice bowl, but we need to be aware of what that outcome is. And right now, there's a lot of shipping that's being diverted away from the South China Sea, being diverted away from going through the Suez Canal. So when you change the normal shipping lanes, when you have an impact on how goods are transferred from point A to point B, there's a cost that's incurred. And ultimately, that cost is burdened by companies, and it affects the cost to running your business and the price you put on a product that you make.
So the recent re-involvement in the Philippines, in Manila, this is a strategic move by the U.S., right?
It is. After the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, the peace dividend is what it was caused back then. We sort of withdrew from a lot of our foreign engagements, certainly from a national defense perspective. The Philippines changed politically, became less focused on Western relations. We lost our military presence in the Philippines for the first time since we took the Philippines from the Spaniards at the end of the Spanish-American War. So we really didn't have the leverage from a national defense perspective using the Philippines should any challenges arise in the Pacific. Well, fast forward, China rises to be their fleet expands. They take a great interest in the South China Sea, which the Philippines borders. And what do we do about it? Well, how do we influence? How do we manage and ensure those sea lanes stay open? Well, we lost our presence in the Philippines, so we've now re-engaged. The new president, well, he's been president for a while, originally reached out to China to develop a relationship. That didn't work out very well. So he turned his focus to the U.S. We've established bilateral military and furthered industrial relationships. But we've had to, like in many places around the world, we've had to go back and revisit, knock on the door, return to where we used to be. And our military presence, those bilateral relationships, have an impact, a direct impact on private sector contracts and agreements. And if our military presence isn't known, if our economic leverage isn't profound in globally, it affects our private sector from being successfully negotiating international agreements. So yes, the Philippines has become very important and successfully so, but we are playing catch up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hampton. This is truly educational and wonderful. Ron Cooper, would you like to comment?
I am thinking a lot about international relationships and trying to think through a bunch of what ifs, Hampton, and from our global perspective in the international relations, it seems a lot of our employees need to be seeming on board with the purpose and our business model and so forth. I'm asking kind of a global question, Hampton, but how important is it that all of our employees are on board with the business model and the global perspective of our respective companies?
Well, I think, it's always important for employees. It doesn't matter who they are, whether they're on a production line, whether they're part of, the janitorial process, they're part of the C-suite, or they're a shareholder. They need to understand what's going on in the company, the business model, the business plan to a certain extent. But as our companies have a global presence, we have employees in different countries. We have people that are traveling internationally to conduct business. These threats, these influences, they need to understand what they are and what they mean to the company's cash flow, revenue, and profit. Even if the individuals to whom we're informing don't necessarily play a role, they don't move the rudder of the company. The fact that they know, that they feel informed, that's a tremendous boost to the morale of the company. It eases internal communication. They feel the rather aspirational role in the company. And people always are thirsty for information. They really want to know what's going on really outside their particular job jar. So the communication of these details at some digestible level is always very important.
And I will say, just as a quick follow-on, Hampton, that I believe it's incumbent on the senior leader to project that level of being informed, that we care enough about how does it all fit together from the top all the way down. And I don't like to think of it as necessarily as a hierarchical, but if I'm the CEO of the company, I'm responsible for making certain everyone in the company understands the business model, how we interact, and hopefully every one of my employees are all in and on board with everything?
Well, I mean, I was just not very long ago in Seattle with a mid-sized company, and the CEO was just very concerned about supply chains. You know, he manufactures products, and it, you know, affects the bottom line. He really wanted to understand more about what's going on, what affects supply chains, what are the influences on sourcing critical minerals and materials. Had to walk through that. And he said, "Look, Hampton, will you hang around another couple of days? I have my shareholders getting together. Would you lay this out for them?" Well, I did in a very conversational way over dinner. Well, that bled into another day where they wanted to restructure their strategic plan, which went into another 2 days of restructuring their business plan, which after I left caused them to change 5 of their major agreements. Well, over the course of a month, that company changed its outlook, it changed part of its business model, and it affected the share price of the company, all because they understood more about how the geopolitics affects their local business rhythm. It's really fascinating. I mean, it doesn't happen with every company, but you know, your question is quite valid. How you communicate all this in the right way is so important because they are the ones that drove the changes, not me.
And I'll say and I'll stop with this, Howard, or Hampton, by saying that I believe that what you were just discussing is, to use Stephen Howard's example, harmony in the company. And when we are all in and we care enough to express and explain the intricacies of where we are, everyone wants to know, and when we care enough to do that, we will have harmony in the organization. Congratulations to you, Hampton.
That's really cool. Matt, yeah, I value your opinion and your insight here.
Well, I mean, as Hampton was saying, you know, what happens in different places around the world, you know, can have a big impact on an individual company's bottom line and you know what their prospects are for the future, and particularly when it comes to expanding growth. I mean, I think Hampton, what have you found with companies in terms of you know, not just Asia Pacific, but what about Europe? I mean, do you see companies finding more opportunities in Europe or fewer?
Europe's not very healthy right now. I spent a lot of time in Poland, Estonia. I'll be visiting Bucharest here very soon. The war in Europe that's going on for almost 3 years is rather amazing. It's displaced a couple million people from Ukraine. It's changed the dynamics of the industrial base in Europe. Poland is about ready to overtake Germany as the industrial capital of Europe, rather shocking to many people. You know, the European Union is going through a lot of changes right now. A lot of it is to do with the influence of China, the war that's going on in Ukraine, simply the politics of Europe. You know, European companies are looking to the United States for a lot of relief. So the attraction of foreign direct investment and homesteading European companies in the United States is high. But I will also say that they're very interested in the outcome of our upcoming presidential election. I was not very long ago sitting in the Hilton Hotel in Warsaw and listening to conversations between Russian businessmen. Yes, they can travel freely anywhere in Europe, amazingly so, but also some French and Danish businessmen, all who speak English better than we do. And they were all talking about, well, it's business, it's the economy, it's inflation, it's the cost of doing business. But as I just sit there and listen, it was all about, well, what's going to go on with the presidential election? What does that mean for the U.S. economy? And since the dollar drives the world's economy, it's a huge influence. Just those conversations, which were all geopolitical, but very, very rooted in the fundamentals of business, reminded me of how important it is to connect with the C-suite. What are the external influences? What are the dots? How do they move? In what sequence when things happen outside the US? So your question about Europe and the level of business in Europe, I would say business today in Europe is very fragile. Very fragile.
Okay, who
The
wants to
UK,
talk?
the UK, although it's not in the European Union, the UK is probably of all the top tier countries in the world, probably the closest to being on the edge.
Yeah.
Hampton, there's
So,
so many remarkable takeaways from this presentation. It was just excellent. One that resonates particularly with me is approaching these issues and problems with, if you will, right to left thinking. I think
It's great. I love
really,
it.
what's that?
I love it. The everybody, well, the Crown Prince that runs the ports in Dubai. I was talking to him about port security. This is a number of years ago, and he said, "Hampton, you're looking at everything completely wrong." Well, I mean, that's quite a statement. I didn't think I was I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but I didn't think I missed it. And he said, "No, you're looking at everything wrong." And he said, "Let's start over here." He went to a whiteboard, just the same whiteboard you have. And he said, look at all these factors that influence your business and how they mingle together. And you start moving all these things from right to left. So he said, start with profit. What profit do you want to make? And then you start moving the equation to the left. And all of a sudden you understand what your business has to look like. I was really dumbfounded. So everything I do today, outside of maybe writing a document, is I do it all from right to left. Now, my wife thinks I'm crazy, but I do it from right to left.
I think it's just such a brilliant way to look at these kinds of issues, as opposed to the tendency is jump right into the weeds and start doing all that stuff without, hey, you know what? See that giant storm coming? You see what's on the horizon? Let's go from right to left. Hampton, I think it's a great book that perhaps Stephen will write. Right to left thinking, finding true success in
It's probably designing the cover right now.
Absolutely great. And it's so visual. It's something people can immediately hook onto and picture it as they approach problems. It's not arcane or mysterious. Right to left. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm way too over just starting, because as you said, in most cultures, we write from left to right. A lot of the thinking is left to right. I think the right to left approach is just a great way to open up people's thinking and problem solving. So thank you.
Well, that's what I did with this company's shareholders up at a huge estate outside of Seattle, and it really made a profound difference. And it's hard for Westerners to explain things going from right to left. It's sort of an acquired taste, but it's effective.
thank you so much. Hampton, as your time here comes to a close, if I could just ask you a question about Germany as a business center. They're so powerful, yet is the change from Warsaw growing industrially, is it now they just more open, more willing to be entrepreneurs, innovative, whereas Germany is very, very strong in what they do and they think they're fine how they are?
Well, the last thing I learned a long time, last thing I want to do is get involved with European politics and kind of, why someone's doing something and the other guy's not. Germany's been a very profound, strong industrial company since the mid-50s, and a lot of it had to do with the Marshall Plan and investment from the United States. But it's a very structured society. It's a very expensive society. The culture and the politics has had an impact on the business community. So you see a number of companies leaving Germany. And it's given an alternative business culture, an alternative political view outlook in Poland and Romania and now in Italy has allowed entrepreneurship to grow, foreign investment to become better leverage. Just the opportunities present themselves. And I would say Germany has an enormous challenge with immigration right now. They have a lot of domestic issues that drain the focus of industry and put a lot of pressure on them. where a lot of other countries in Europe don't have that experience.
Thank you
Hampton,
very
would
much,
you look-
Hampton.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
Hampton, would you project 5-10 years as to, would you play in Poland versus perhaps as much emphasis in the past as to where you may have been in Germany? Would you comment on that? Because you take me by surprise, frankly,
Yeah, well,
when you said that Poland's overtaking Germany.
Well, the momentum is there. I don't think it's more than a few years off. It's just the economics. It's the EU has put a lot of money into Poland, whereas Germany has done a lot of internal investment. But it's just the opportunities are greater in Poland. The labor, the skill level of labor is there. They have they have been very aggressive in decentralizing, getting away, privatizing companies as opposed to state-owned enterprises. It's just the benefits that are afforded to companies are huge. It's whether it's from taxes, whether it's from education. It's just a lot of it's just a mindset of the people of Poland. They are very aggressive and they're very dedicated to developing the country on the world stage. And the war in Europe has made a positive impact on Poland because a lot of things flow through Poland down into Ukraine, and a lot of Ukrainian talent has moved to Poland, which has made a huge impact. It's not trivial at all. So Poland has really benefited from the shift of rather progressive politics to something that's more conservative, more business oriented. And you're seeing that also translate into other countries in Europe, Estonia, Lithuania, even down into Italy now. So the structure, the stress, the difficulty of doing business in Germany is not replicated in Poland and elsewhere.
Thank you, Hampton. I want to introduce Simon Davis, who comes to us. I think he's in Washington this week, but he's from England. Welcome, my friend.
Yeah. Hi, sorry guys. First of all, apologies for my lateness. I'm here in Washington at the WERC conference, and we had a client that asked us for a breakfast/meeting this morning, which clearly takes precedence when we're here. Myself and my colleague Mario is over from Singapore. So please accept my hearty apologies. Just on the point there that was being made, I'd like to just pick up on that. You went on to talk a bit about the what's happened in Ukraine and the impact, if you like, if we can take a positive from such a tragedy on Poland, is the lithium market is absolutely enormous in Ukraine, and that a lot of that is being transferred over to Poland. You're quite right, and with the EV market so huge as it is in Europe, that is a huge boost to the rebuilding or the infrastructure within that country. And a lot of that talent from that particular marketplace has simply migrated across. So that's a really great observation around there. And of course, Germany has its automotive business and its financial business that really secure it as one of the leaders across Europe. Interesting times, but just a comment, wanted to follow up on that.
Okay, and now I want you to take 2 minutes and tell our audience and our panel about ITX, the company.
I'll try and do it a little quicker. It's always one of the longest elevator pitches ever about what we do. We don't provide a service in the same way as any service providers would do. We are a company that advise and consult with corporate organizations that have international locations around the world, wholly tax-paying entities where they employ and deploy their staff. And what we do is look at an alternative operating model called a global employment company. That is called a GEC, a GEC, or a GEC if you're in France or Switzerland. And the GEC is wholly owned by the corporate, a dotted line, owned by that company, and that becomes the legal employer or employer of those international hires that cross borders for that organization. It helps with tax efficiency and social security, as well as many other things. It's a centralized way of managing your international program. And we do that from Switzerland. They have lots of tax and bilateral agreements around the world that other countries do not have. And we take advantage of that. Interestingly, 60% of people in a recent poll we ran in global mobility are confused or still have a misunderstanding around what the GEC does. And we spend a lot of time trying to educate the market around that. But the most of the Fortune 500 big international companies will have a GEC and do have and operate GECs today. It's not always known, but that is a fact. So it's our task to try and tell the world, and it's pretty tough, I can tell you. Yeah, so that's what we do. We manage global employment company setup and feasibility.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to have you as a customer.
Sure.
Hampton, thanks so much. I know you got a dash. We need to move on. Simon, how much time do you have with us today?
I'm good now for 35, 40 minutes.
Okay, good. We're going to go now to Chuck Brooks, cybersecurity expert. Chuck, say hi and welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's great to be here again. It's always great to be on your broadcasts. They're very informative and reaches a broad variety of professionals.
Yeah, thank you. So Chuck Brooks is extremely well known in the DC market and beyond, a two-time presidential appointee in your field. Why don't you tell us about that briefly?
Sure. And I was appointed twice. The first time was by President Ronald Reagan, where I served as a assistant to the director of Voice of America. And the second time was under George W. Bush, where I was appointed to the Department of Homeland Security, both presidential appointments.
Yeah, great.
Equated it.
Okay, I want to turn the program over to you now for the next few minutes.
Sure.
You can show slide or the front cover of your book
Yeah, I
again.
can show the front cover again. I can really explain things. This is my new book again that just is out, available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. But really, since we're talking about geopolitical threats, I think cybersecurity is a great topic. First of all, what I call the axis is really China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And it's not new. They've been doing this for over a decade, a lot more than that, actually. But the threats are very real, and they're different kinds of threats. And if you look at these players, first you see the Chinese, and the Chinese have different motivations. That they're looking at a long game where they're trying to procure technologies or steal technologies and IP, and they've been very good at it. They stole plans to the hypersonic aircraft from the U.S. They've done not just that, but many of our weapon systems have been compromised, and that's why we've had to urgently bolster the supply chain at DoD because they made an effort to do this. They frequently go into Silicon Valley and invest in startups to get the IP. They also have a good deal of their military directed just doing it cybersecurity type attacks or activities. And some of the attacks you see from the Chinese are also testing our critical infrastructure, like water supplies, state and local governments, etc. So they're looking to see what our response will be. Now the Russians are a little bit different in the fact that they operate in a different way. They didn't have the resources that the Chinese put behind it in the military, but they have a lot of ingenuity in some of their attacks. Solar winds is what comes to mind. Has been done for many years. So they've placed malware in some of our biggest networks, and that's why we went to this whole zero trust policy, because we didn't know it was connected by devices or people, or even malware stuck in these systems. So the Russians have done that. They do it maliciously for geopolitical purposes. They also have capabilities. They've hijacked a Viasat satellite during the Ukrainian conflict during the first few days. So space is a realm of opportunity for them too. And what we know them for more is that they basically work closely with organized criminal groups sponsored by them, and actually sometimes funded or shared funding with them. And these groups are pretty powerful. They're known for the ransomware attacks, and they've generated hundreds of millions of dollars of results from going after large corporations, small, medium business. They don't care. During the COVID scare or epidemic, they took advantage of a lot of the hospitals and healthcare facilities and launched ransomware attacks against them. So they're very formidable in this area, and these groups particularly have been operating basically with little repercussion. There's some prosecution recently, but they're hidden in a lot of small places in Eastern Europe, and they also have a lot of funding and protection. So that's a real formidable threat too. And then you have the North Koreans who have really financed their economy on ransomware. Most of their defense budget has been stolen from a lot of these attacks. And then along those lines, the Iranians too. They've also launched sophisticated attacks, mostly to try and disrupt infrastructure, not just against Israel and Aramco, which has been a major target of them, but also against the United States and other places too. So if you look at that axis, you need to be a little bit worried and a little bit more prepared, I think, in the cyber terms, because we're going into a new era. And this era is involving interesting technologies. And that's really the thesis of my book, is that, everyone's been talking about artificial intelligence, which has been around. It's not new because it's been really machine learning and stuff, but it's advancing, and it's advancing largely through generative AI, where people can now create their own programs and code, and then go to the dark web and match it with a toolkit to do some hacking, a ransomware, whatever they want to do. And then again, these geopolitical actors have much more invested and much more sophisticated in this, and they could use this capability to find vulnerabilities in networks and also automate a lot of attacks, which they're doing. Instead of going after a few hundred corporate targets, now they can go after tens of thousands of them automatically. And then it only takes a couple to get lucky and pursue basically extortion, and that's what they do. And so we have to learn the implications of AI, what it's doing right now. It has both defensive and offensive capabilities. I just mentioned some of the offensive capabilities. Another one that's sort of scary on the offensive side is what's called polymorphic malware, where they can disguise the malware, and AI can change its form. That is not new either, but it's more advanced now. But on the defensive side, it's also helped because there's a huge cybersecurity shortage. We're way short pretty much globally. And what it can be done is to automate threat intelligence, particularly to take away false positives, or at least know what is real and what isn't real. It also can work to help a lot of the SOC analysts and people that are trying to keep up with things. Some of the mundane tasks they can give to AI, but also they can write the reports now with the aid of AI, because a lot of that report writing takes hours and hours of time. Again, there's just a few of them and not enough. So it's definitely helpful there. And then also it could look at your networks and discover vulnerabilities and gaps that you need to fill. So AI is certainly coming on very strong, and every company, about 80% now, are adopting AI policies, has opportunities to help be more efficient and create prosperity too. But again, you have to look at security in all these aspects, because we're in a digital ecosystem. Everything's connected, and that connectivity is growing. Some of the other technologies that are impacting are 5G. What used to take minutes now takes milliseconds, because of the speed of 5G, and reduces all the latency, and also basically creates stronger networks. So we're looking at that too as impacting the geopolitical scene. Of course, Huawei has put a lot of effort in trying to go into the various countries and put their networks in the hardware and 5G in. And so that has been a battle between policy there, and the U.S. has succeeded in a large part with Europe, and also with Canada and other places in stopping it, because that's, once they get that, they get all the data. And the second thing I think what I like to, when we're talking about data, is we have to look at quantum computing. For many years, it's been thought that it's a couple decades away, but actually quantum algorithms are here. Chinese have just demonstrated quantum entanglement and communication with the satellite. And there's a lot of growth in this area. Maybe not the super quantum computing that Google and D3 and all those others are trying to build, but there is photonic computing out there that also operates on a quantum system. So there's actually ready quantum capabilities out there. And the implications of this are already being seen, because NIST, which is the commercial arm that works with DoD and DHS to create standards, has already insisted on creating a quantum resistant algorithm for vendors operating with the US government. And that's happened in the last year to be able to defeat basically the day, what is called Q Day, when the Chinese most likely, since they're the biggest adversary in this area, get the capability to basically decrypt any data they have stolen, which they've stolen a lot, including OPM records many years ago. And they have an advantage, of course, because quantum computing is many millions of times faster than any supercomputer we have now capability. So it gives a super intelligence capability. And then the other aspect, I think, which I touched on in the book, was IoT. And this is really, part of really the world of connectivity, where everything we're connected to now with our devices, our home systems, and our alarms, our cameras, our devices, our appliances. So each one of those is basically an endpoint that allows an attacker to come in. And IoT is expanding at such a rate. There's more than 50 billion devices out there. If you look at all the trillions of sensors and stuff out there too, it's much more than that. It's continuing to grow. So it creates a dilemma for cybersecurity professionals. So that is why, again, you've seen a lot of these new policies coming in with, basically zero trust, to make sure that every device connected is known and is basically secured, encrypted, or whatever it needs to be done. And every person that it also has access to a network is basically given the right property of, identity access management capabilities or less capabilities. So I think you're seeing a new era with all this connectivity, all these devices, all these people, and all these new technologies come online. It's almost like the wild, wild west, and it's already problematic since cybersecurity is already, there's really been no remedy. I mean, there's millions of companies out there, and really what you can only do nowadays is try to make yourself less of a low-hanging fruit for the adversaries. But that we basically built an internet system without security in mind, and so we're paying the consequences right now, and it's going to get even more dire if we don't really look at everything we can do to protect ourselves. And that's what my book is about.
That's breathtaking. I'll tell you, not funny, but really educational. Thank you.
Sure.
So should we all be, we've already been warned, essentially, not to use walkie-talkies. It's
Well,
not a joke. I know, but
yeah. No, I mean,
scary.
you're looking at electronic warfare too. I mean, if you look at the devices now, if you look at multi-domain warfare, we have a lot of military people here. It's changed because you're seeing robotics and drones being used more and more. So the soldiers that are operating these are now sometimes behind a display operating weaponry, rather than being in front on the field. Of course, it doesn't completely change kinetic warfare, but it's a huge added element to it. And what we've seen recently too in these two conflicts, particularly with Iran and conflict in Ukraine. I mean, with Ukraine and Russia, I say Iran because they began giving Russia all these drones, is that it's become a huge aspect of warfare there. And Ukraine has been really quite successful in neutralizing many of the tanks and even taking out submarines and stuff that were in dock and ships. So warfare has changed from this too. And you're right. And then you mentioned with the Hezbollah thing with Israel is basically ingenious. Knew that communications is essential to any type of war planning, and they were able to basically surreptitiously put these devices, explosives in these devices, and activate them electronically, which really took out the whole leadership and changed the nature of warfare. So that's really important to look at when we're going forward, because what was in the past, we tend to fight the last war, it's now different, and we're learning a lot of lessons now from what's happening in Israel and what's happening in Ukraine too. So that's a good point.
Chuck, this Gary Sanger, could you comment about a terrible question, and that is why and how is Putin still in power?
I think he's still in power because he's I think he's basically got the elites still around him. If you look at the kind of people that are being recruited to fight in Russia, they're not traditionally from St. Petersburg or Moscow. The people that are affluent and part of doing well in the economy. It's taking people from the outskirts, the poor people on the farms and stuff like that, who have very little power to do things. And he's also reigned internally. Anyone that's a threat to them, he's just basically eliminated, including some of the ex-oligarchs. So I think he's a ruthless dictator, just like Stalin. And it's very difficult to penetrate that layer. And I think if there are opportunities to get him, there would be attempts because he's a lot of enemies. But it's difficult to say. I mean, there's all kinds of rumors too that he is ill and sick, but none of those come to fruition yet. So I think he has lots.
Could you also comment on why you think the US and the UK, my own government and the US, are failing to try to do anything about this tyranny that's going on in Israel, and it's got way out of hand, beyond out of hand. Is there anything you can say on that?
Well, I wouldn't call it tyranny. I would call it self-defense. I differ on that position with
Okay, I most certainly would not, but I guess we could take this conversation in a very different direction.
Yeah.
But it maybe initially, I think, in light of what happened in October, but I think it's gone. The position of the goalpost has moved way down the field since then, and it eclipsed.
I sort of differ. I mean, again, when you have a neighbor launch tens of thousands of missiles at you from Lebanon and from when the Houthis are doing it, and from Iran twice, no other country would sit back and do this. So I think it's a sort of a double standard. If the United States were attacked from Canada and Mexico, the way Israel was, I think the reaction would be different. I think the only reason is that there's a bias in the press that certainly does that. And if you look at the reactions of the Gulf states, they behind the scenes have been very pleased with the reaction. They fear the same extremism to their own places, and they want to make sure that it's negated there. So I differ with the depiction.
I guess had the US been a Canadian and a Mexican country, then I would agree with that. But as it wasn't, I don't. So anyway, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
So on this program, we're not going to get into politics.
We don't have to get into political stuff, but that's just my perspective.
It's a fascinating insight. And
yeah, for sure.
And very, very interesting.
Sure. Yeah. Ron Cooper.
Chuck, I'm very interested in, I'm going to advance your mention of electronic countermeasures in the military context, but just using that as a kind of a takeoff point, is there an encryption science, an encryption service that is pretty much a fail-safe method of securing personal and company data, or in the context of ECM, is it always a measure, countermeasure, counter, and so forth, to where no matter what's out there today, it's going to necessarily have to change in a couple of weeks?
That's a really good question. I think there's several levels to answer to that. One, there's no fail-safe that right now that we know of, largely because of quantum and other things that are coming in line. Also, military-grade encryption type is available to corporations, and that's very good. And again, it's all in cybersecurity is really about making yourself less of a target, because most of the hackers are going to go where it's easier. And if you have levels of encryption and difficult and good policies and cyber hygiene, and more importantly, if you segment your data, your sensitive data and other sources so they can't get to it, they're going to go to somewhere else. So I highly recommend that businesses look at getting encryption, and there's a lot available, and a lot you can debate upon, which is more appropriate for your business type of business. But the other way to us is managed services do this too. They'll go in, they'll look at the whole level of your vulnerabilities and help you protect yourself.
Now, you mentioned military grade encryption.
I just want to interrupt and say that we have about 15 minutes remaining, and we want to make sure Stephen can talk about his books. And this is a fascinating conversation. I also want to announce that on December 12th, that's 12/12, very honored that HSBC U.S. headquarters is going to host my in-person meeting, which will also have a digital component. So I welcome you all to participate either in person or virtually. HSBC has also hosted Global Business News in London 3 times and number 4 is coming up this spring. So more about all that. Very honored to have that support for sure, of course. And it's because global trade needs global talent, whether it's in office or remote, whether it's in UK or is it dispersed around the world. And that's where Simon Davis comes in, because he's an expert at that. And I have a video that he and I did. I'm going to distribute it to everybody here, so you can learn more about the GEC on your own time. Stephen Howard, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Ed. We face a lot of problems in the world today.
Doing business with partnering with American companies is the name of your book
Yeah,
that you wrote with Ali Shami.
yeah, that's the book I wrote with Ali. I'll share that on the screen for those who haven't seen it yet.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, the focus here is to help educate the non-American business community to things that the American business community thinks are important, like time, being on time, for instance. Time is money is an American phrase that we often use. To understand that in many parts of the world, they build the focus on the relationship first and then get down to business. And the American business community tends to, no, let's get down to business, get down to brass tacks, as we say. And then therefore, work on the relationship at a later stage. We build the relationship through the business. So a couple of things. But what's interesting, since this book came out in June, is both Ali and I, and Ali, by the way, for those you don't know, is a former senior manager at the Boeing company, born in Lebanon, moved to the United States around, I think, 19 or 20. And so obviously he spent his adult life living in the United States. I'm just the opposite. I was born in the United States, educated in the United States, and left in my early 20s for Asia. Lived in Asia for 21 years, then Australia for 12 years, and Mexico for 3 years. So I've spent most of my adult life outside the United States, working, helping American companies bridge these divides with non-American companies, and also helping non-American companies understand the American business culture. So that's how we came together to write this book. But as I was saying, an interesting thing has happened since the book came out in June. Both Ali and I have been contacted by various American organizations and said, come talk to us, please. Because you may not be aware of this, but 19% of the American workforce today was not born in the United States. So the chances are in any organization, any consultant working with any organization, you're going to be dealing with people who come from different cultures, non-US cultures. And even though they may have come to the United States for their university years, maybe they've came here for their employment, whatever happens to be, they still have their national cultures that forms their mindsets. So I found it interesting. We found another niche market for the book and for our respective consultancy businesses with the U.S. companies to help them understand their own workforce. But also, like in my case, I recently did work with a U.S. Boston-based firm, IT firm, that had half its employees in India, and the U.S. people had never traveled to India. The managers I'm talking about, obviously the executives did, and so the U.S. managers are getting highly frustrated with their Indian counterparts, and vice versa. They just couldn't communicate. They couldn't cross these cultural divides until we went in and showed them, hey, this is what's important in one culture. This is what's important to the other culture, and this is how you can close those gaps. So. It's been an interesting journey. So thanks, Ed.
Thank you. This is so educational. I've learned so much doing this show. Ken Lloyd, would you like to sum up?
Sum this up. How do you come down to a few words that give you such a great perspective of business and people and working in the world and what we're looking at today and looking down the road in terms of what's coming up? All of it so quickly, again, whether it's technological change or unfortunately conflict in the world and the changes in migration, the changes in our labor force, it just tells all of us, going back to the beginning, let's look at this from right to left. And as we make our plans and strategies to deal with the world as it's changing and to deal with work as it's changing, to keep that mindset to recognize that there'll be a lot of, and I know this has been discussed before, but a lot of rebranding, which is really adjusting, adapting to change, taking proactive steps to make sure that we're current, relevant, and on top of where our businesses is going, where our businesses are going, and where the world is going. I think the insights from all of the presenters today have just been remarkable and profoundly helpful.
Stephen.
Yeah, thought crossed my mind, I think partly during Chuck's presentation. I think I started forming my thoughts when Hampton was talking. But, I moved to Asia in the 1980s, and, the United States was and still is pretty much the big gorilla in terms of international business. But at that time, it was just huge. And we used to have a saying that when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. But having listened to Chuck and Hampton today, I want to share you my closing thought here is that when the global business community catches a fever or fever increases, the U.S. business community starts to sweat. So it's a bi-directional problem these days. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, Chuck.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of change happening in the world, not just in security. And I think you're seeing it now also with EU and AI. So there's a lot of cooperation in global business and in global alliances. So I think along with the negatives, there's a lot of positive to take out of this. And I think it's a digital world. And the other thing about a digital world is that there are no boundaries. So transactions when you're doing business and also when you're protecting yourself are sort of integrated now. So we have a lot to learn in the next few years.
Yeah, Matt Burns.
Yeah, I thought this morning's discussion was particularly insightful when we started talking about, some of the interconnections between, what's happening in different places around the world and the impact it has on even some medium-sized or small companies here in the United States. And Hampton's point that, even a small company these days needs to keep track of what's going on around the world because of the potential impact it could have on them here, either their own company and its bottom line or their clients. So really great opportunity to learn.
Gary.
Well, what's important, depending on your last audience you were with, the perspective that Poland might be bigger, more strategic, more important than Germany. I think I've been under a rock for a while, so I miss that. When I think of the supply chain, I'm working with a major mineral company, and so you think about what that might be in the US, across the borders, into the global part of it. I'm just struck with what's important, what's key. Matt's thought, just where is this all changing? And you, the CEO, you, the board, how do you get focus on the right stuff? How do you get focused on the right threat? How do you get focused on the right opportunity? I don't think we can do enough of these. And my compliments to you, Ed. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, you guys honor me. Ron Cooper, your voice is so powerful and so strong, not only from a sound point of view, but your front line vision is cool.
Ed, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I love having thoughts stimulated. In every discussion we're on, it just stimulates my thinking. I think of what we said earlier about right to left. I think of that as know your numbers. And when we know our numbers, we know exactly what is affecting, where are we investing and what return are we getting on each of those terms, on each of the expenditures we have. And yes, we've got to know interrelationally and globally, we're integrally connected. So we've got to know how all of these impacts and connections affect each other. Just I love the thought stimulation. So thank you all.
Thank you. Attica sent me a note. She's still in that meeting that was supposed to be over an hour ago. So she's not going to be with us. And I'll be working on doing some editing, not a lot, on this. And we'll send by the end of my day today 2 editions out. Gallery view, sort of like Hollywood Squares is what we're looking at now. And also the single close-up where every speaker, everyone who's speaking will have close-up on their face. Very dynamic if it's done right. And I think it's going to be super powerful for the world that we send this program out to starting tomorrow. Thanks for being, please come back. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you a lot, Stephen.